I'm only here for the free food, Cambria, Clara Bennett muttered under her breath as she adjusted the zipper on her dress in the mirror of her friend's car. Don't let me flirt. If I start flirting, slap me. Cambria laughed as she parked her Mercedes outside the Willow Pines Golf Club. It's a dinner, not a dating app. Just enjoy the wine, nod politely, and pretend to care about golf. Clara sighed, pushing her curls behind her ears. She hated these kinds of events full of people who had country club memberships and last names that opened doors. She was a freelance interior designer who lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a broken heater. The only reason she was here was because Cambria didn't want to show up alone to her boss's annual dinner and had promised her steak and wine in exchange. The moment they walked in, Clara froze. The dining hall was stunning gold chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, and tables draped in white linens. Waiters moved silently around with champagne trays. Everyone was dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. And at table 7, right next to hers, sat the most dangerously attractive man she'd ever seen. Sharp navy suit, clean-cut jawline. Hair styled like he didn't try but definitely did. He was laughing at something an older man said, but his eyes were scanning the room like he was already bored. His watch alone probably cost more than Clara's rent for the year. Cambria leaned in. That's Prescott Langston. He owns half the real estate in Oak Valley. He's like crazy rich. Clara blinked. That man's name is Prescott. I know, it's giving old money. Cambria giggled. But apparently his company flipped the entire Eastwood district last year. He's single, by the way. Yeah, and I'm a princess, Clara muttered. As they were led to their seats, Clara's stomach dropped when the host pointed to the seat beside Prescott. Miss Bennett, you'll be here. She slid into the chair awkwardly, trying not to make eye contact. The scent of his cologne hit her something warm and expensive. Evening, he said, his voice low and smooth. I don't think I've seen you around here. Clara glanced at him. That's because I don't belong here. I'm just a friend of a friend, he smiled. Not the fake kind, the real kind. Then I'm lucky you sat next to me, Clara coughed. I don't do golf or dinners where the napkins are folded like swans. Prescott chuckled. Neither do I. I just fund the events and pretend to care. She looked at him, surprised. You're not into golf, I'm into deals. Golf just happens to be where people sign them. Clara raised an eyebrow. So you're one of those men who talks mergers over cocktails, Prescott leaned in slightly. Only if the cocktail is old-fashioned and the merger's worth 7 figures. She tried not to laugh. He was arrogant, sure, but not in an annoying way, more like he knew who he was and didn't need to prove it. They spent the next hour talking. Not small talk, real talk. About why she left her job at a firm to start her own design business. About how he hated being seen as just another rich guy. About their favorite movies, worst dates, and most embarrassing childhood moments. At some point, dessert was served. Clara hadn't even noticed the time pass. I haven't laughed like this in months, Prescott said, looking at her like she was something rare. Clara felt her cheeks warm. You probably say that to all the girls you meet at golf club dinners. He leaned closer, his voice quieter. I've never said it before, she swallowed. Her chest felt tight, but not in a bad way. In a something's happening, and I don't know what kind of way. When the dinner ended, people started standing, saying their goodbyes. Cambria waved from across the room, giving her a thumbs up before turning back to her group. Prescott stood and reached for Clara's coat before she could. I'm walking you to your car. You don't have to, I want to. Outside, the breeze was cool. Clara held her coat closed as they walked down the stone path toward the parking area. I know this sounds forward, Prescott said as they reached her car, but I don't want tonight to be the only time I see you. Clara smiled nervously. You don't even know me. I know you made me forget how much I hate these dinners. That counts for something. She looked up at him. You're serious? I don't joke about things that matter, she hesitated. I don't do rich guy flings, just so you know. Prescott's jaw tightened, but not with anger, with something else. Respect, maybe. Then I guess I'll just have to prove I'm not a fling, he said softly. She opened her car door but paused. Okay, then prove it. He smiled, and this time it held something different, something dangerous, something real. I will. As she drove away, Clara's heart was racing. She hadn't planned on meeting anyone, definitely not someone like Prescott Langston. But something told her this was only the beginning. 3 days later, Clara was elbow-deep in fabric swatches and lamp catalogs when someone knocked on the glass of the cafe window beside her. She looked up, expecting Cambria or maybe one of her clients running late. Instead, standing there with one hand in his pocket and the other holding 2 coffees, was Prescott Langston. Her pen slipped. He stepped inside before she could process it, brushing past the curious barista and heading straight to her table. His coat was open over a charcoal vest, and the sharp lines of his suit made him look completely out of place in the cozy, plant-filled cafe. The few customers nearby tried not to stare. They failed. "I was told you haunt this place most afternoons," he said, setting a cup in front of her. "Hazelnut latte, no syrup, extra foam," Clara blinked. "How did you?" I asked Cambria. "She owed me a favor after I agreed to sponsor her charity auction next month." She narrowed her eyes. "So you bribed my friend for my coffee order? I prefer to call it strategic resourcing." He sat across from her without waiting for an invitation, stretching his legs like he owned the table too. "You're very persistent," Clara said, folding her arms. "And you're very hard to forget," Prescott replied. "I couldn't get you out of my head." Clara looked down at the swatches on the table. "I'm working. I can see that." He picked up a sample of navy velvet. "Planning to roof-ulster a throne. I have a client opening a boutique downtown." "They want moody elegance, their words." Prescott leaned back. "Why not take on a bigger project? Office buildings, hotels, more scale, more budget, less moody." She raised an eyebrow. "Not everyone with money wants to design cold, sterile spaces." "True," he said, watching her closely. "But someone with your instincts shouldn't be stuck sourcing sconces for indecisive clients." Clara frowned. "Are you insulting my job or offering me one?" He gave a small shake of his head. "Neither, I'm just saying you've got vision. And people like that should be building something lasting." She paused, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said that to her before, not without an agenda. Prescott glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting in 15 minutes, but I didn't want to wait another week to see you again." Clara studied him. "You really don't hear no often, do you?" "Only from people I don't want to hear it from. You don't fall into that category." He stood, placing a card on the table. "There's a gala Friday night. Modern art exhibit. I'm donating a few pieces from my private collection. If you come, I'll prove I'm not just some guy with a checkbook." Clara looked at the card. No phone number, just an address and a time. "And if I don't come?" He smiled quietly, almost like a challenge. "Then I'll wait outside your favorite cafe with a different coffee order every day until you do." After he left, the warmth from his presence lingered. Clara stared at the card for a long moment before slipping it into her bag. On Friday evening, Clara stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting a silver cuff around her wrist. She hadn't planned on going, not really. But something about Prescott made her curious. He wasn't just charming, he was intentional. Every word felt like it had weight. Cambria had dropped off a dress earlier that day, deep plum, asymmetrical neckline, and a tag that made Clara almost faint, but her friend had insisted it was borrowed from a stylist friend and returned Monday morning. "It's fashion diplomacy," Cambria had said. When Clara arrived at the gallery, the valet barely blinked as she handed over the keys to her aging sedan. Inside, the space was transformed. Light installations pulsed across the ceiling, and abstract sculptures stood like sentinels between clusters of glittering guests. She spotted Prescott immediately. Not because he stood still, he didn't, but because people parted when he moved. He wore a tailored black tux, nothing flashy, but somehow more commanding than everyone else in sequins and silk. And yet, the moment he saw her, he stopped mid-conversation. He walked toward her without hesitation. "You came," he said, his voice lower now, like the room faded behind them. Clara nodded. "I wanted to see what kind of man donates art. And I haven't decided if it's arrogance or generosity yet." He laughed softly. "That's fair." He offered his arm. "Can I show you something?" She hesitated, then linked her arm with his. They walked past a sculpture made entirely of shattered glass and copper wire, then through a corridor where canvases glowed under soft lighting. At the end of the hall, Prescott stopped in front of a painting bold strokes of blue and gold, chaotic and beautiful. "My mother painted that," he said. Clara turned to him, surprised. "She died when I was 21. She painted all through my childhood but only let me keep a few pieces." He looked at the canvas. "This one, it hung in her studio. She said it reminded her that beauty doesn't need permission to exist." Clara's chest tightened. "It's stunning." Prescott's voice was quieter now. "Most people assume wealth makes you forget things, but it just makes you more aware of what you've lost." She looked at him, then not the man in the suit or the billionaire with a gallery wing, but someone who carried grief like a hidden scar. "You still miss her," she said. "Every day." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the crowd distant. Then Prescott turned to her. "Come with me tomorrow." Clara blinked. "Where?" "There's a house I've been renovating. It's about an hour outside the city. I want your opinion on the interior." "I trust your eye," she hesitated. "Is this business or something else?" "Both," he said simply. "I want to see what you do when no one's telling you what they want. Just you and a space." Clara exhaled. "Okay. I'll come." Prescott smiled, not with charm or confidence this time, but with something quieter, gratitude. "Then I'll pick you up at 10. As he walked her to the exit, Clara felt something shift. It wasn't just chemistry anymore, it was something deeper, something real. The crunch of gravel beneath the tires was the only sound as Prescott's black vintage Jaguar curved up the long private drive. Clara watched the landscape unfold through the window, rolling hills dotted with bare trees, the early spring sun casting long shadows across the winding road. They had driven in near silence after leaving the city, the space between them charged but unspoken. "This used to be a vineyard," Prescott said, his hand resting casually on the wheel. "The original house burned down in the 90s. I bought the land 2 years ago." Clara turned toward him. "Why this place?" He didn't look at her. "Because no one else wanted it." The house came into view at the top of the hill, contemporary with clean lines, dark stone, and expansive windows that reflected the sky like mirrors. It wasn't huge, but it had presence. Clara stepped out slowly, boots crunching on the gravel, trying to take it all in. "You built this?" she asked. "With a team," he said. "But I designed it myself, every room, every angle." She followed him up the wide stone steps and through the front doors. Inside, the space opened up into high ceilings, exposed beams, and walls of glass that looked out over the valley. It was unfinished raw wood, boxes of fixtures in the corners, wires still peeking from the walls, but the bones of it were stunning. Prescott paused in the center of the room. "I want it to feel grounded, not flashy, a place you can breathe." Clara walked slowly through the space, fingertips brushing against rough plaster, eyes tracing the arch of the staircase. "You haven't decided on finishes yet." He leaned against a support beam. "I've seen 100 designs. None of them felt like home." Clara turned to face him. "And you think I can fix that?" "I think you see things differently than most people." She narrowed her eyes. "Because I'm not rich." "Because you're honest," he said, his voice even. "And you notice the details that matter." Clara looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of his gaze. "This space doesn't need much, just someone who isn't afraid of contrast." Prescott tilted his head. "Contrast?" She walked toward the fireplace that hadn't been tiled yet. "You've got clean lines and dark stone. Add something unexpected, salvaged wood for the mantel. A slate wall behind the bed with a velvet headboard, deep rust or ochre, something alive, something with memory." He folded his arms. "You speak like you've already lived here." Clara glanced at him. "I speak like someone who understands what loneliness echoes like in a house that looks too perfect." Prescott said nothing. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, but heavy with understanding. She stepped into what looked like the kitchen to be, then turned back. "Why show me this?" He met her eyes without hesitation. "Because I don't want to build a life that looks good from the outside and feels hollow inside. I've done that already." Clara swallowed hard, unsettled by how much she understood. "This place could be extraordinary. But only if you stop trying to make it look like it belongs in a magazine." He smiled faintly. "Then tell me what it should look like." "Let me sketch something," she said. "No promises. If you hate it, pretend it never happened. Deal?" They spent the next hour walking the space room by room. Clara jotted notes in her sketchpad while Prescott offered occasional explanations, a reading nook he wanted by the window, a hidden door to the wine cellar. She didn't ask him how many properties he owned or what he did with all of them. It didn't matter here. Afterward, he led her out onto the back terrace. The view stretched endlessly, soft green hills melting into the horizon. "I don't bring people here," he said. Clara looked at him. "Then why me?" He didn't look away. "Because you don't try to impress me," she shifted, unsure what to do with the tightness in her chest. "I think I should head back soon." Prescott nodded. "I'll drive you." They were halfway down the hill when Clara spoke again. "You said you've built a life that looked good but felt hollow." "What changed?" He didn't answer right away. "I thought building an empire would make me feel safe, but it just made me more alone." Clara turned slightly in her seat. "You don't seem alone. That's because I've learned how to fill silence with the sound of people who want something from me." She felt the weight of that confession settle into the space between them. "I don't want anything from you, Prescott." He smiled without looking at her. "That's what scares me." By the time they returned to the city, the sky had deepened into slate blue. Clara gathered her things slowly from the passenger seat, unsure if she should say goodbye or thank you or something else entirely. Prescott stepped around the car and opened her door before she could move. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into the back seat. He handed her a box. Inside was a set of antique drafting pencils, worn and beautiful, the kind used by architects before computers took over. "They were my grandfather's," he said. "He built furniture by hand, thought perfection ruined character." Clara stared at the pencils. "I can't accept these." "You already did," he said gently. "They'll do more in your hands than gathering dust in mine." She looked up at him, her throat tightening. "You don't give gifts like this to people you barely know." "I'm not trying to impress you," he murmured. "I'm trying to be honest." She nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the box. "Then I'll be honest too." Prescott waited. "I'm terrified of what you make me feel," she said, "because it's been a long time since anyone made me feel anything at all." His expression didn't change, but his eyes did, sharpened, focused, as if something in him had just locked into place. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. "Not with me." Clara stepped back, overwhelmed. "I need time." He didn't reach for her, didn't push. "Take what you need." And with that, she turned and walked into her building, the box of pencils clutched to her chest, heart hammering like it hadn't in years. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: Prescott Langston wasn't going anywhere. Clara stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, both hands gripping the iron railing as the city glittered beneath her. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that kept you wide awake. Behind her, soft jazz played from unseen speakers, and the golden light from 100 candles flickered across linen-covered tables and crystal glasses. She had no idea how he'd done it. One minute she was stepping out of her apartment to meet Cambria for brunch, and the next Prescott's driver was waiting downstairs with an envelope and a single line. "Wear something you feel powerful in." Now here she was, on the roof of an old theater that had been transformed for the night into something out of a dream. Every detail was thoughtful, from the wine she'd once mentioned liking to the orchids hanging from the pergola. It was a world built just for her, and still she was trying to catch her breath. Prescott stepped out from the shadows behind her, his voice low. "I didn't want to wait anymore." Clara turned slowly. "Wait for what?" He walked toward her, no hesitation in his steps, his eyes locked on hers like the rest of the city didn't exist. "For you to stop pretending this isn't happening." She held his gaze. "I'm not pretending. I'm just trying to survive it." Prescott stopped a few feet away. "I used to think I wanted someone who fit into my world, someone who could glide through galas and boardrooms and never challenge me. And now, I want someone who makes me question everything." Clara's voice was quiet. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," he said, "but I've been safe for too long." She looked at him, the candlelight catching on the sharp lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders that wasn't quite nerves but something close. "Why this?" "Why now? You told me once you were afraid of what I made you feel," he said. "But I'm not afraid anymore. You've seen the worst of me, the ambition, the walls, the silence, and you're still here. I don't need a perfect life, Clara. I need a real one. She took a breath, but he didn't give her time to reply. I bought the building, he said. She blinked. What building? The one on East Mercer, the one you couldn't afford to lease for your studio. Her heart stopped. Prescott, I'm not giving it to you, he said quickly. I'm offering you a deal. You design the space however you want, you run your business from it, and in return, you let me prove that I'm not trying to own you, I'm trying to build something with you. Clara stepped back. You can't just throw real estate at me like that. I can, he said, but I'm not. I'm offering you a key. You decide what door it opens. She stared at him, emotions crashing through her like waves. You said you didn't want to impress me. I don't, he said. I want to invest in you. In us? Clara turned away, pacing to the edge of the terrace. What if I say no? Then I'll still show up, he said. Because I don't fall easily, Clara, but I've already fallen. She froze. He stepped behind her, close but not touching. I fell when you made fun of my swan napkins. When you told me my house was too perfect, when you said you didn't want anything from me, she turned, her voice shaking. I never asked for this. I know, he said, but I'm offering it anyway. He reached into his coat and pulled out a velvet box, not a ring, something smaller. When he opened it, her breath caught. Inside was one of her sketches, the first one she'd drawn for him, rendered in brushed gold on a delicate chain. The lines of the staircase, the fireplace, the windows etched with precision and reverence. I had it made, he said. Because you changed that space, the same way you changed me. Clara touched the pendant with trembling fingers. Prescott, he gently took her hand. I'm not asking you to move in. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. I'm asking you to let this be real. To stop running because it's easier than falling. She looked up at him, eyes filled with something between fear and longing. What if I fall too hard? Then I'll catch you, he whispered. The words broke something in her. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead to his chest, the weight of all her fears melting beneath the certainty in his arms. I don't want perfect, she said into his shirt. I want truth. I want messy, real, terrifying truth. He wrapped his arms around her. Then you have me. They stood like that for a long time, the city alive beneath them, the future wide open. Later, they danced alone beneath the stars, no music but the rhythm of their hearts, and Clara knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was the moment everything changed. Prescott Langston hadn't just fallen. He'd built a life ready to welcome her into it, and she was ready to walk through the door. The glass doors slid open with a soft hiss as Clara stepped into the Mercer Street building her building now. The scent of fresh paint and sawdust still lingered in the air, but beneath it was something more exhilarating. The quiet thrill of possibility finally realized. Prescott stood in the center of the loft, his jacket tossed over a sawhorse, sleeves rolled up, a measuring tape looped around his wrist. He looked over his shoulder the moment she entered. You're early, he said, brushing a bit of plaster dust off his hands. You left the lights on, Clara replied, crossing the empty expanse with measured steps. I figured that was either an invitation or an oversight. I don't make oversights, he said as she reached him. She stopped inches from him, eyes sweeping the skeletal framework of the future studio. I've been thinking, she said, about the space. I want to make it more than just a place for clients. I want to build a design incubator, a place for young designers who can't afford their first office. Prescott's brow lifted. You want to share it, I want to grow it, she said. You said once that legacy should matter. I want mine to be more than mood boards and lighting fixtures. He studied her, and then something passed through his expression, something that looked like pride. You're serious, deadly. Then I'll double the square footage, he said. We'll buy the adjoining unit, break down the wall. Build an atrium? Clara laughed, the sound bouncing off the bare brick. You say that like it's ordering takeout. It might as well be, he said. You have the vision, I'll handle the logistics. She folded her arms. You always assume I'll say yes. I don't assume, he said. I trust. She paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather folio. Then trust me with this. He opened it slowly. Inside were 3 new renderings, elevated, layered, and boldly unconventional. Each design reimagined the space as a living gallery of textures. Concrete panels paired with reclaimed brass, soft linen benches beside blackened steel columns, and color palettes drawn from rust and dusk. Prescott looked up. "You've been holding back. I had to be sure," she said, "that you weren't another man who wanted to own the story instead of build it. And now I know you're not afraid of being rewritten." He closed the folio, then reached for her hand. "I want you to design more than this space." Clara tilted her head. "What else, my life?" "Our life." He didn't kneel. He didn't reach for a ring. Instead, he drew something from his pocket, an old photograph. A black and white image of a woman with wild, dark curls and paint-stained hands standing in front of an unfinished canvas. "That's your mother," Clara said softly. He nodded. "She always said you should only share your life with someone who makes the world feel less loud." Clara traced the edge of the photo. "And I do that for you. You silence the noise," he said. "You make decisions without doubting yourself. You walk into rooms full of people richer than you and never shrink. I don't want a love that's convenient. I want a love that expands." Her chest tightened as she closed the space between them. "Then let's build it." Prescott leaned down, their foreheads brushing, and kissed her. It wasn't urgent or possessive, it was steady, reverent, like a promise sealed not with diamonds but with breath and belief. 2 weeks later, the studio opened with a small, curated event. No press, no spectacle. Just a handful of close friends, a few young interns already sketching ideas at the long communal table, and a quiet toast made with locally bottled sparkling wine Clara had chosen herself. Cambria hugged her tightly near the window. "You did it," she whispered. Clara smiled. "We did." Prescott arrived late, having flown in from a short trip to London for a contract signing. He walked straight to Clara, no fanfare, and handed her a small velvet box. "This time," he said, "it is a ring." She opened it and found a band unlike any she'd ever seen, forged from brushed gold and raw platinum, set with a single emerald-cut diamond that caught the light like a prism. But what made her breath catch was the engraving on the inside, her original staircase sketch from the house. No words, just a symbol of where they began. "Yes," she said without hesitation, slipping it on. They married 3 months later in the garden behind the Mercer Street studio, with wildflowers and jazz musicians and no guest list longer than 40 names. Prescott wore a dark gray suit with no tie. Clara wore a silk dress with no frills. They wrote their own vows, and neither cried until the other did. That night, Prescott carried her up the narrow stairs of the townhouse they decided to live in for their first year, one she had designed with imperfect floors and oversized windows. They danced in the kitchen with bare feet and no music, the city glowing behind them. Years later, the studio expanded into an entire block. The design incubator graduated over 60 students. Clara's work was featured in architectural journals. Prescott stepped back from daily operations of his firm to focus on philanthropic projects. But most importantly, they built a life full of intention. They didn't chase perfection, they built truth. And every room they ever touched together held echoes of laughter, arguments that always ended in understanding, and love that never needed to prove itself to anyone else. Love that felt like home. Always.